Hello YouTube, and welcome back to my tutorial series on how to build a desktop application style object-oriented Discord bot in Python. So last video, we set up our at-a-glance class and we got all the basic behaviors all squared away. But we have no UI elements yet. We have no buttons, we have no modals to input data with, and so that's what I'd like to address in this video. It's not going to do a whole lot of good for me to explain things because I'm garbage at explaining, so let's just jump right into our code, shall we? So under UI, let's make a new Python file called at-a-glance. And then before we do anything, let's go to our init for the UI package and say from.at-a-glance import star, okay, because we're going to forget otherwise. Okay, and in at-a-glance, honestly, this time I'm going to tell you all of the imports we're going to need right up front because this is going to get pretty chunky and I don't want to have to keep scrolling up, 3, 4, 500 lines to put in imports. So we're going to do them all at once and you're going to thank me later. Okay, so from future, import annotations. We're going to import math. I know, scary. Even scarier, we're going to import RE. All right, from Discord, we're going to import input text style, interaction, and member. From discord.ui, we're going to import input text and select. From typing, we're going to import optional, tuple, and union. Then down here, we're going to say from utilities, import star. And then from within the UI package, we're going to say from .common import star. And from .view, we want to import star as well, because that's going to be our frog view. And finally, if we're type checking, we're going to be using a reference to the parent at-a-glance object, right? So from classes.profiles, let's import profile at-a-glance. Cool. So this is everything we're going to need throughout the module. Okay, next up, let's define our dunder all because we've been forgetting otherwise. And we're going to start this off with at-a-glance view, okay? Because that's the view that we're going to drop down here and make right now. So our class at-a-glance view is going to be a frog view. And we need to define our init. And within this init, we're going to take the owner, as we always do, which is a union of member and user, which I forgot to import. Okay, I swear that's all the imports we need. We just needed user as well. Okay, so we're also going to take a reference to the profile object, which is a profile at a glance. And then for good measure, we're going to take our args and keyword args. All right, let's call the superclass, the FrogView superclass. Dot init, we're going to pass the owner as well as our args and keyword args. Args, there we go. And let's say that self.aag, so we're going to give the at-a-glance view the at-a-glance object equals the profile object that we passed in. And let's also define our button list, which is going to equal an empty list for now. But let's loop through anyway and say let's add all the buttons. So for button in button list, self.add_item button. Okay, great. So our at-a-glance status view is set up. We're going to use this in addition to the status embed that we defined last time. Now, before we define our buttons, let's go ahead and take a look at the behavior of our first button. We're going to take these one at a time. So let's pull up Discord. And if we run the at-a-glance command for the main bot that I created, okay, here's our at-a-glance section. It looks a little bit different than the one that we created up here. Okay, remember that this was the original and this is the improved, the one that we're working on. Okay, but the behavior for these buttons is going to be basically the same. So if I click on the gender pronoun button, we get an embedded message as a prompt, and then a drop-down box. Okay? And if we select our value, we get an additional drop-down that allows us to select our pronouns, as many as we'd like. And then if we click out, it's going to update that previous message with our pronouns. So actually nothing changed for me. So let me go ahead and change this. And then, so instead of she, her here, it now has the changed version. Okay? And then let's say we want to put a custom value, right? So let's put custom value. And that's going to pop up a modal box, which we can then put our custom value in, and it updates it in the embed. And notice that it's now a code snippet to indicate that this is not text that we preset. This is not pre-allowed text. This is something that the user put in as a custom value. Okay, so back over here in our at-a-glance UI, let's say right here above our at-a-glance view, let's define our first button. And this is going to be class gender pronoun button, and it will be a profile section button. So we want that special behavior. And let's define our init. So in addition to self, it's going to take the gender value. So remember, the gender value could be an optional union of the gender enum or a string. Okay, and let's go ahead and call our superclass for the button. Our button label is going to be gender/pronouns. It's not going to be disabled, so that's false, and then we'll put it in row 0 for now. Now right down here, we can call the self.setStyle function of the profile section button, and we'll pass in the gender. Okay? Now let's say async def callback. What do we want to do in our callback? Well, let's get a shortened version to the profile object like we have for all of our other ones. So self.view.aag. And then let's say await aag.setGender, and we'll pass in the interaction. Okay, so let's pause and let's go over to our at-a-glance class under profiles, and let's define the setGender function. Okay, so we can do that down here past the properties, and let's do it under set and above update. Okay, so this is async def set_gender, and it's going to take in self and an interaction which is of type interaction with no return. And what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to start by defining a prompt. And this prompt is going to equal, make embed. And into this, we're going to say the title is equal to gender/pronoun selection. Okay, and actually, yeah, let's continue. And description is going to equal, and let's drop down with some parentheses so we can use string concatenation here. Select your preferred gender from the selector below, period, new line. Don't worry, comma, you'll be able to choose your pronouns next, exclamation point. And let's put 2 new lines here, give a little space. And then down here, let's put 2 asterisks to make this bold so it stands out. If you select custom with tick marks around it to put it in code snippets to set it apart, comma, a pop-up will appear for you. And let's put a new line here so we don't make the embed too long to provide your custom gender text, period, and then 2 asterisks, and then we're done. Okay? And then under here, I want to say timestamp equals false. Okay. So next up, we're going to instantiate a view. Okay? And this is going to be a gender pronoun view, which we haven't defined yet. And then into this, we need to pass the owner of the view, which we have through the interaction because we have the user of the interaction. And we're also going to need a reference to the @aglance object. Okay, so let's pass in the self here. Now before we continue this function, let's define our gender pronoun view. So let's go over here to UI @aglance, and down here, under our @aglance view, let's say class gender pronoun view. And this is going to be, of course, a frog view. And for this, let's define the init. In the init, like all of our frog views, we need the owner, which is going to be a member, or, a union of member or a user. And we're also going to take a reference to the @aglance, which is a profile @aglance. And then any additional args and keyword args that we want to pass to the view constructor. Okay, so let's call that superclass constructor here with our owner, and then any args that we want to pass in. And then what I want to do is I want to define the close on complete behavior. And I'm going to set this to true, because once this view is completed, once this is done dispatching, it's going to delete itself. It's going to clean up after itself. Okay, and then we also want to pass in our keyword args for good measure. So let's also define self.@aglance for the gender pronoun view. Okay, because we need a cached reference to the object from within the components of this view. Okay, and then I want to say self.addItem, and we're going to make this we're going to make this select menu now, but it's going to be called a gender select, and then instantiate it within there. Okay, so let's make our gender select. Again, right here under our @aglance view, let's say class gender select, which is going to be of select menu type. And then in here we can define our init. And we don't actually need to take anything into this init. Finally, we don't need to pass any arguments in. So let's just directly call the superclass constructor and define what we want our select menu to look like. Okay, so let's define our placeholder first. All I'm going to say here is select your preferred gender. We're going to say options equals an empty list for now, and we're going to define what our options are, but I want to finish this constructor first. Okay, this is not going to be disabled, and then it's going to go into row 0, like that. All right, so what are we going to do for our options here? Well, let's think about this. So we already have an enum that corresponds to the options that we want to appear in the select menu. So we have this enum over here, and its values are male, female, non-binary, and custom, which we can also use as our select menu values. Okay, and we've also got a pronoun enum here, okay? And we could use these as select menu values. Same with our race, same with our clans. Okay, so here in our frog enum, let's define a method, a not implemented method that we can implement within our subclasses, okay? So I want to make this a static method. This isn't going to actually take in any information. Okay, so for this I'm going to say def select options, and there's nothing in the parentheses, and this is going to return us a list of select option. Okay, you'll need to import list and select option from typing and Discord respectively. I did those earlier for some debugging, so make sure you do that. And then, as we always do, let's add a raise not implemented error here. Okay, so for our section type, we're not going to need select options, so we can just leave it as not implemented within our section type. We're never going to be calling the select options method on this enum. Okay, but our gender enum we will. So let's go ahead and drop down here, and we'll say @static method def select options. Okay, and I just want to return a list, and we're going to do some list comprehension in here. Okay, so for every item that we iterate through, I want to make a select option, And the label is going to be gender.propername. And you'll see where we get the gender variable in a second. And then the value of the select option needs to be a string. Okay, and it can just be gender.value. Okay, but how are we getting the gender? Well, out here, outside of the parenthesis for the select option in constructor, let's say for gender in gender, capitalized. Okay, so we can iterate through all the items in this enum, and we can use this proper name property to create a label for our select option, and then we're just going to store the numerical value as a string and assign that to the value of the select option. Okay, and this is going to return us a list of options based on this enum. Cool. So now that we've defined our select option behavior for this enum, let's go back into our at-a-glance UI, and we can substitute in that select option method. Okay, so we can just say gender.select options with no arguments, just like that. Awesome. So now we will have a select menu with 4 options, one of which is going to be a custom option. But inherently, our select menu doesn't know what to do if we select this custom option. It doesn't know it needs to display a modal. So let's go ahead and define that here in the callback. So async def callback. And within this callback, the first thing we're going to want to do is check to see what value from within our gender enum the user selected. Because if the user selected our custom value, we want to present them with a modal, right? So let's do that. So let's say if the integer value of self.values sub 0, because all of our values in a select pop-up are stored as string values, so we need to convert that to an integer first. If the integer value of self.values sub 0 does not equal 4, so in this case it's going to be 1 through 3, then we can say self.view. Let's actually make a shortened reference to our at-a-glance. So AAG equals self.view.aag. Okay, and now we can just say AAG.gender, so we can call the gender properties directly here, equals a gender enum, and then we need to convert self.values sub 0 into an int. Okay, just like that, self.values sub 0. Okay, and that's how we can assign a gender enum to our at-a-glance object from the select menu. But we're not done yet. So let's say it does equal 4. What do we do then? Well, then we want to present the user with a modal, right? So let's instantiate our modal, and we're going to call this a custom gender modal. We'll define this now, and then let's also go ahead and pass in self dot. Oh, we already made the shortened link, so AAG dot underscore gender. Remember, because we want to pass in that underlying data point so we can fill the modal with that value if it's already a string. Okay, so we haven't defined this modal yet, so let's just come up here above our gender select and do exactly that. We'll call this a custom gender modal, and then this will be a frog modal. And then within the init here, def init, we're going to be, of course, taking our current value, which is an optional gender or string. Needs to be a union of gender and string. Okay. And then let's make our superclass call first. So we'll say super.init and pass the title as set custom gender value. Okay, now let's say self.add item, so we can add an input text here. And the style is going to be like all our instruction boxes. It's going to be input text style.multiline. Okay, the label is going to be instructions. What's our placeholder going to be? Our shortened version of instructions. Well, that's easy. Enter your custom gender identity below. Okay. Now, what do we want our more verbose instructions to be? What's going to be the value here? Well, how about enter your custom gender identity in the box below, new line, you can choose your preferred pronouns after this. Cool. And then let's finally make this not required, because we don't care what goes in the instructions box, right? So let's say self.addItem next, and we'll give the user an input text to put in their actual custom value. Okay, so the style for this is going to be input text style.singleline. Our label is going to be custom gender. Placeholder is going to be, for example, amphibian. Okay, and what's our value going to be? Well, we have three potential options here. We have a none value, which we can handle in our input text. We have a string value, which we can also handle in our input text. And we have a gender enum, which we can't handle. So since 2 out of 3 options are going to be kosher within this input text, we just need to filter out that gender enum. Okay, so let's say current value, if not is instance, current value gender. Okay, else none. So if the user has entered a string value previously, it'll fill here. If there's no value in the gender, that will also fill here with a none value. But in the instance that this current value is within the gender enum, we're going to use a none value for this value because the user hasn't entered anything custom yet, and so it'll be blank. Okay? Let's define our max length, okay, because that's going to be important, especially in all of our at-a-glance fields, because the formatting is so specific for this particular class. So I feel like 30 is an appropriate length, and then we do want to make this required, okay, because character name, color, gender are going to be the 3 required profile attributes. So if somebody wants to make a profile, they at least won't be able to submit an empty box. It will at least have a color, a name, and a gender on there. Okay, so let's define our callback. It's going to be very straightforward. The first thing we want to do is set self.value equal to self.children subs1.value, because sub0 is our instructions field. Let's set self.complete equal to true. And then we'll await an interaction.response.edit message, edit message with nothing in the parentheses for a dummy response. And then we can call self.stop on our modal to close it. Let's come back down here to our gender select, and we can finish off the logic in the callback. Okay, so once we've instantiated the modal here, we want to say await interaction.response.sendModal, and we'll pass in the modal that we created. And then we want to say await modal.wait, so that we don't keep executing the code without waiting for a response of some kind. Now we need to check if the modal is complete, because if the user has clicked the cancel button, we don't want to continue processing this logic. Right, so if not modal.complete, I want to say await self.view.stop. And if you're familiar with the PyCord library, you're going to say, wait, this isn't an await function, okay? So if you're used to Discord, you'll know that the stop function of a view is not typically await. But if we open up our frog view over here and we go down to our stop function, you'll see that we've made it an async function, because we've defined this behavior in which if we mark close on complete as true, then it's going to delete the message this view is attached to keep things neat and tidy, right? So that's why we have an async function here for our stop method in our frog view. But squigglies are no good, right? We don't want to see squigglies ever for any reason. So if we go over here and we put type::ignore and spell it correctly, that's going to tell the type checker not to worry about this one particular line. Okay, so we're going to use this every once in a while, particularly when we call view.stop, so it doesn't yell at us. Okay, but what if the user does complete the modal? Okay, so we can just say AAG, because we created this shortened reference to the at-a-glance object, .gender, the property equals modal.value. Okay, because in the event that the modal has been submitted, remember, we required that they put a value in their custom gender if that's what they wanted to do. So we can just directly grab that value here and assign it to the property gender, which again we'll call the update logic once once we assign it to the property, so we don't have to worry about calling update logic here. Okay, enough rambling. Let's drop down. And what I want to do, regardless of what value they picked from the selector, is I want to say self.placeholder equals a string value of self, or excuse me, we can just say aag.gender, the property. Okay, because remember, gender is going to return us not set, or it's going to return us the proper name of the enum, or it's going to return us the string value that they entered. So we can just set it directly that way. And I want to say self.disabled. So we're referring to the disabled attribute of the select menu that we're creating. And after the select menu has been interacted with, I want to set self.disabled equal to true so that the user can't change values in this select once they've already picked it, okay? And then in order to test to see if all of this is working currently, we're not going to add our pronoun selector right now. We're going to just go straight to the final step and say await interaction dot edit original response, because this view is, and this selector is going to be attached to a response message, not the original status message that we sent. Remember, and we'll look at this in a second. But here in the parentheses, we want to say view equals self.view. Okay, so leaving off the pronouns for now so that we can test, let's make sure that we export our gender pronoun view in Dunder all. And then if we go back to our at-a-glance class, you can see the red squiggly has disappeared in our setGender function. Okay, so all that's left to do in this function is respond to the button click, which is this interaction that we're receiving in the setGender function. We're responding to that button click with await interaction.response.send message. And for the embed, we're going to say prompt because we've defined that prompt here. And then for the view, we're also going to say view. And as usual, when we have a view, we want to await view.wait. And then this function is done. Okay, so let's continue backwards. Make sure everything's good here. So we haven't defined any additional callback in our gender pronoun button. So let's finish with that. So after we set the value, we need to say self.setStyle so that we'll update the style of the button. And we'll just say aag.gender, the underlying data point. And now we can say await edit message helper. This will update the original message, the initial message, okay? And into here, we're going to say interaction equals interaction. Embed equals aag.status. And the view equals self.view. Okay. Very cool. So the button's working, and we call the button here. So let's make sure that we instantiate it within the button list. And into this, we need to pass the gender. So let's say self.aag.gender, the underlying value, just like that. Very cool, very cool. And the at-a-glance view gets called from our set function, which we haven't done yet. So let's instantiate that view here. So let's say view equals gender pronoun view. Nope, not gender pronoun view. It's the other view. What did we call that? At a glance view. That's what we called it. At a glance view. And then into this we need to pass the owner, which is the interaction.user. And then we also need to pass the at a glance object, which is self. Okay, so into the response, we need to pass view, which is equal to view, and then we need to await view.wait like that. Okay, and where's the set function called from? It's called from the profiles cog, and no need to update that behavior. So we should now have a button attached to our status message. Let's jump into Discord and test. And run our command. And here we have our button. Okay, excellent. So if we click on the button, we're given a prompt, and the select options are populating as desired. And then if we click on one, you can see that the message has been edited. Okay, the selector has been grayed out and the placeholder has been changed to the value that I selected. Okay, the interactions failed because we didn't actually write a proper response for the select menu usage. That response is going to be the act of adding another select menu to the message, okay? So don't worry about the interaction failing for the time being. Okay, let's run this one more time and check the custom logic and make sure that works. Okay, so we'll put custom, and we're greeted with a modal. And if I submit that, you can see that this has been disabled and our value has been added to the box as the placeholder instead of our default text. Okay, great. Everything is working successfully and I couldn't be happier. So we can jump back into our code and turn the bot off for now. And let's say right here under self.disabled within our gender select in the at-a-glance UI module, self.view.addItem pronoun select. Okay, and we're going to define this right now. So let's go up here above the gender select and say class pronoun select is a select. And for the init, we don't need to take any parameters, but we do need to call the superclass like we usually do, okay? And for our placeholder, let's say select your preferred pronouns. And for the options, well, we've got an enum for this, right? So let's jump over to our enums really fast. And let's see, in our pronouns, let's define our static method. Static method, def select options. And we're going to return a list of select options. And then for the label of the option, we're just going to say pronoun dot proper name, excuse me. And then for the value, we need to make it a string value. And we're going to say pronoun dot value. And then here outside the select option constructor for pronoun in pronoun, the enum. Okay? So now we can jump back into our at-a-glance UI and say pronoun.select options. Okay? Now, we want to make it so that the user can select multiple values, okay? But we also don't want to hard code numbers. So for this, for the max values, we're going to say we want to pass the length of pronoun dot select options. So literally the options that we're passing in, we're going to allow, if the user really wants to, they can select all of those. It's going to look really odd on their profile, but you know what? More power to them. And then we do want to specify this goes into row 1, okay? Because row 0 is already taken up by our gender select down here. Alrighty, so for our callback, this is going to be a little bit more involved. And we're going to say async def callback. First thing we want to do is make a shortened version of our at-a-glance reference. So we're going to say self.view.aag, spelled properly. Okay, and we're going to say aag.pronouns equals some list comprehension. Pronoun int I for I in self.values. Okay, so what are we saying here? So we're going through all the values in this select once it's been submitted. And remember, all of our values have to be strings. That's just how select menus work. So it's going through each of these string values and it's converting the value into an integer and then dropping that integer into the pronoun enum. Okay, and we don't have any custom options here, so we can convert exactly like this. All right, and then I want to say self.view.complete equals true. Okay, and I want to await interaction.response.edit message as a dummy response. And then we need to say await edit message helper. Interaction is the first parameter, and then our embed equals self dot, we can just say aag dot status. Okay? And then finally, since we're done with all of the interactions that are attached to this message, because this isn't the original message, this is the gender pronoun selection message. Here, it's this one. And since this is only going to have the two interactions from these selects, we can say await self.view.stop. And then I'm going to throw in a type ignore here so we don't get a squiggly. Okay. Hopefully that callback makes sense. And now let's go ahead and we should be able to test that. Okay, so let's jump into let's hit our play button first, excuse me. And let's jump into Discord. Okay, so far so good. And we have a pronoun selector. We have a squiggly though. So we have forgotten to properly respond to this interaction. We can deal with that in a second though. And if we select pronouns, you can see the message deleted itself, and our original message has been updated with the proper information. Okay, and we don't have any errors. Boy, we are on a roll tonight, aren't we? Now, before we forget, in the event that we don't respond to the initial gender select with a modal, we need to say await interaction.response.edit message as a dummy reply. Okay, so we always have to have that proper response in some form in one of our callbacks. Okay, so let's double check, make sure that works. Okay, and we'll pull up Discord. Okay, and let's select this. Okay, no more ellipsis here. And then as long as we do that and it cleans up after itself. Okay, great. This is working exactly as we want it to. We are making progress now. Let's not stop. Let's jump back into our FrogBot, and we can shut down the bot for the time being. And what do we want to do next? Well, I think let's go ahead and add support for races and clans. Okay, so where we're going to start with this is up here by our gender pronoun button. Let's go right underneath it. And we'll say class race clan button. And this will be a profile section button. And into our init, we're going to need to pass the current race. Okay, and that could be an optional union of race or string. And then let's call the superclass super.init. We're going to go ahead and this is a button, so we need to pass the label and make this race/clan. It won't be disabled. Disabled is false. And then the row is going to be 0. Let's make sure we call self.setStyle like we always do with our race value. And then we can define our callback. Async def callback. And then shortened reference to the parent class. So self.view.aag. Await aag.set race clan, which we're going to define here in a minute, but let's go ahead and finish out our callback. Make sure we pass in the interaction there. Self.setStyle, and we're going to say aag.clan this time, the underlying clan attribute. But we passed in race at the top. Why are we looking at the clan here? Well, within the set race clan function that we're going to call here, this does all the setting for both values, okay? So we're essentially pausing execution of our code between this function call here and this function call here, because this needs to return some values to the caller before we can set our style, okay? So we're going to be setting the race and the clan before we come back here and set the style of the button. And then here we can say await edit message helper interaction equals interaction, embed equals aag.status, and view equals self.view. Self. Okay, awesome. let's jump into our at-a-glance class and define the setRaceClan function, okay? So right here below setGender, we can say async def setRaceClan. And then into this, we're going to take the interaction that was spawned when clicking the button, and this won't have any return for now. All right, and we can start by defining our prompt for the user, and that's going to equal a call to make embed. The title for our embed is going to be select your race and clan. The description is going to be parentheses, so we can use string concatenation. And the first line is going to say select your character's race from the drop down below. Period, new line. And then our next line is going to say an additional selector will then appear for you to choose your clan. Period. 2 new lines. And then we're going to say 2 asterisks to make this bold. If none of those apply, you may select custom in ticks to make it a code snippet, and a pop-up will, new line, to keep the embed short, appear for you to enter your own custom information into. Period. 2 asterisks to make it bold. We'll end the bold, and then we're good. Let's also make sure that we don't add a timestamp to this embed. And then down here outside the embed call, we can say view equals race clan select view, which we haven't defined yet, and we're going to, but this is going to take the same parameters as we took up here for the gender pronoun view. So we need to pass in the interaction.user and the self reference to the at-a-glance object. Okay, and then honestly, this behavior from the gender pronoun view, the setGender function, is going to be the same in the setRaceClan function. So I'm just going to paste the response message behavior here. And the rest of what we're doing is going to be in the UI at-a-glance. Okay, so let's jump down here to our gender pronoun view, and underneath that, we will make a race clan view. Race clan select view, excuse me. And this will be a frog view. And then into the init, just like we did in the gender pronoun view above, we're going to take the owner, which is a union member user. We're going to take the at-a-glance, that's right, which is a profile at-a-glance, and then our args and keyword args. Let's call the superclass super.init, pass in the owner and our args, keyword args. Okay, and we'll cache a reference to the at-a-glance that we passed in, so self.aag equals aag. And let's not forget to type it. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, I apologize. And then we want to say self.addItem, and this is going to be a race select, okay? And we're going to define that right now. So here above the race clan select view, let's say class race select. Okay, and this is going to be a select. And within our init, we don't need to take any parameters, so we can just say super.init and pass in the values to the select superclass. So let's say the placeholder is going to be select your race. The options are going to be our enum options for race, but we haven't set those up yet. So back here in our enums, let's go down to our race enum, and then we'll define our static method. And this is going to be def select options. And then we want to define just the return behavior, right? It's just going to return a list of select options. And the label is going to be race.propername. Value is going to be just like the others, string race.value. And then outside the select option constructor for race in race the enum. Okay, cool. So let's drop this back into our UI. So we can say race.select options like that. And then we don't want this to be disabled, so we can set that to false. And then we're going to set the row on this one to 0 because it's the first selector that we're going to put in. Okay, so let's define our callback, async def callback. And within this callback, before we do anything, let's go ahead and say response equals race enum, and we're going to say integer self.values sub 0, okay? Because this is only going, by default, the user can only pick one value from this. So we know that as long as we don't specify a max value that they can pick, such as we did here in the pronoun selector, we know they're only going to pick one, so we only need to access that first value. So we're going to convert that to an integer and then ultimately convert that to a race enum so we can look at it. Okay, so the special behavior that we have here is if they've picked a custom value. All right, so if response is race.custom, then what do we want to do? Well, we want to give them a modal to input their information, right? So let's define a modal called custom race clan modal, okay? And before we continue with this callback, let's define that. Okay, so right here above the race select, we can just say class custom race clan modal. This is going to be a frog modal. All right, now this modal is going to be dual purpose because we don't want to display a select menu for the race, have the user pick and select and say they have a custom race, and then display another select menu that just makes them prompt for a custom value. Okay, that's an extra step and that's a little silly. So if they decide that they want a custom race, we're going to give them a modal in which they can input a race and a clan, but the clan won't be required. Just in case they don't have that little bit of additional information, we're not going to force them to come up with something, okay? So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's define our init, and we're going to take a reference to the current race, which is an optional union of race or string. And then we also want to take a reference to the current clan, which is the same thing, a union, but this time it's a clan enum or a string. Optional. There we go. Okay, so let's call our superclass, and we'll drop a title into the constructor here. Set custom race and clan values. Okay, cool. Now let's add our instructions. Okay, so we can say self.addItem, input text, and then the style that we want for all of our instructions is input text style.multiline. The label is going to be instructions. And then what do we want our placeholder to be? Well, something simple as usual. Enter your custom race and clan values below race. Okay, and then for the value, I don't have much to elaborate on this, so we're just going to say enter your custom race and clan values below, only race is required. Okay, so then we're just letting the user know that since they have decided to input a custom race, they need to at least do that much. But if they have a subclassification of their race, their clan, they can also enter that. And finally, since this is an instructions field, we don't want to make it required. Okay, very good. Let's add our next input text. Okay, so self.addItem, input text. This is going to be the style is going to be input text style.single line for this one. Label is going to be race. Placeholder. Let's make up a race for ourselves. How about Amphibarian? Okay, that seems made up enough. And we want the max length to be, well, since the race and the clan are going to be displayed on one line, we don't want those to extend past, we don't want those to mess up the format. So we need to plan for both of these potentially being their max value, okay? And 50 characters is typically the max value that we want on any line in our About Me section. So for safety's sake, we're going to say 25 is the max length for both the custom race and the custom clan. Okay, and then remember, since they have opted to put in custom values, we're going to at least require the race. Okay, next up we're going to add another item, and it'll be an input text. And once again, the style is going to be input text style dot single line. Label is going to be clan. Placeholder, what do we want for our placeholder to be? How about pad leaper? Leaper. Seems like a good clan. Max length, again, let's make the max length. Let's make that 25. And then for this one, we don't want to require it. All right, let's go ahead and define our callback. Async def async def callback. And then we just want to grab the values from this and we'll process them back in our calling function. Okay, so self.value, so the value of the modal, the frog modal, we're going to turn it into a tuple of values. So we're going to say self.children sub1.value and self.children sub2.value. But remember, if they didn't input anything into the clan input, then it's going to return an empty string. Equals. So we don't want that. So in the event that there's an empty string, we just want to store none. So if self.children sub2.value value else none. Okay, let's mark the modal as complete. Complete equals true. And then we'll send back a dummy interaction to the response, to the interaction response, edit message. And we'll say self.stop to close the modal. Okay, so now we should have our custom behavior here. Yes, right, and almost forgot, let's make sure that we add our values into the race and clan inputs. So for the value of the race input, let's say current race, if not, is instance, current race race enum, else none. Current race, if, there we go, much less in terms of squigglies now. Okay, so we're doing the current race if it's not a race enum. Otherwise, if it is a race enum, we're going to put a blank box. Same thing down here. So for the value of the clan input, it's going to be current clan. If not, is instance current clan enum, else none. Okay? And that's how we'll fill the user's current values if they exist. All right, so what do we do now? Well, let's carry on with our callback down here in the race select, okay? So for the custom race modal, let's go ahead and get a shortened version of the at-a-glance object reference. So we're going to say self.view.aag, and then into the custom race modal, we can pass aag.race with the underscore, and also aag._clan. Okay, and that'll fill the modal. So then what do we do with the modal? Well, we're going to say await interaction.response.send modal, and we'll drop the modal in there. And then we want to await modal.wait. Await. Now, if the modal is complete, okay, so if modal.complete, so if the user has submitted it and we've collected information from that modal, I want to set aag.race, the property equals modal.value sub0, because remember we made the modal value a tuple, so we can access it this way. And then let's duplicate this, and we'll make aag.clan equal to modal.value sub1. Okay, and then either way, we're going to say await self.view.stop, because we're done with the interactions in this chain, and we can return from here. And now, what happens if the user's response was not the custom value? So the first thing we want to do is say aag.race equals the response. Okay, so it's been made into an enum already up here, so we can just set the value directly like that. Okay, and I want to say self.placeholder in reference to the select menu that we're working inside of equals response.proper name. Okay, just for good, just to make it look good. Self.disabled equals true. And then we're going to say self.view.add item, and we haven't created this yet, but we're going to make a clan select. And what I want to do with the clan select is I want to pass in our response like that, and you'll see why we do that momentarily. But last up, let's say await interaction.response.edit message. Actually, we can use our edit message helper here. So let's say edit message helper interaction, and then the view equals self.view. Okay? All right, so let's define our clan select really fast, and then we can test. So let's go up here above the race select, and we'll say class clan select, which is of type select. So here in our clan select, let's say def init, and into the select we're going to take the race that we created, which is a race enum. Okay, let's call the superclass here, and we'll say that our placeholder for the select is going to be select your clan. And then the options, I want to pass an empty list just as a placeholder because we're coming back to this, but this is where we're going to put the race in. Okay, we don't want this to be disabled, so let's set that to false. And then let's make sure that we set the row to 1 because we want this to appear below the race select. Okay, so let's talk about our options. Well, I mean, we can pass clan.select options, right? That's pretty simple. But the problem is we don't want all of these options. Okay, that's not going to work. So what I want to do is I want to, where we define our static method, we're going to define a bit of a different static method. Okay, so def select options. And I'm going to change this to a regular enum. Now, why are we doing that? Well, now in our select options, we can take in the race like this, and we can alter which select options, which options from this enum are returned based upon the race that we're given. However, if this is a frog enum, we're going to get a squiggly that says that the signature is different than the base method. Okay, because the base method takes in no arguments. So we need this to be a regular enum. This doesn't actually change any behavior because we don't have any behavior defined in the base class. So we can still implement our proper name. We can still implement our select options. This just gives us the freedom to define whatever signature we want here. Okay. So here I'm going to make an if-else block, well, an if-elif block, and we're just going to go through each of our races here from the race enum, and we're going to define which options are returned. Okay, so if race is race.ara, we're going to say clan options equals clan.rayan, clan.xela, clan.custom, and clan.na. So this will give the person the value of having a preset race but having a custom clan, or they can just ignore the clan entirely. Whatever is best to them. We want to make this profile as flexible as possible. Okay, so I'm even going to copy these because these two options are going to be in all of our if-else-if chunks. Okay, so elif race is race.elezen, clan options equals clan.duskwhite, oh my goodness, duskwhite, clan.wildwood, and then our other two options. Okay, elif race is race.hrothgar, clan options equal clan.hellion, clan.thelost, and then our other two. Elif race is race.hure. Our clan options are going to equal clan.highlander and clan.midlander. as well as our custom and not applicable. elif race is race.lalafell. Clan options equal clan.dunesfolk, clan.plainsfolk, and our custom and not applicable. elif race is race.mikote, clan options equal clan.keeper, clan.keeper of the moon, clan.seeker of the sun, as well as custom and NA. elif race is race.rogaden, the best race, thank you very much. Clan options equal clan.hellsguard, clan.seawolf, and the other two as well. elif, almost done. elif race is race.viera. Stick with me, folks. Clan options equal clan.rava, clan.vina, as well as our custom and NA. And in the event that neither of those is the case, which will happen if someone selects Fantasia Addict, we can just say clan options equals clan.custom and clan.na, just like that. Okay, and then down here, let's return a list of select options, and we're going to say label equals clan.propername, value equals string clan.value, and then outside the constructor for clan in clan options, okay, like that. Now we can jump back to our at-a-glance UI script and pass in the race that we've given our clan select here, and this will populate it with the appropriate select options. So now we can define our callback, async def callback, and the first thing we want to do is the same thing we did down here for the race. We want to grab a shortened reference to our at-a-glance, and then we want to set our response value. Okay, so we can just do that. AAG equals self.view.aag, and then the response is equal to clan value, clan enum, integer value, self.values sub 0. Okay, so now we have our reference info, which means we can now say if response is clan.custom, okay, we're going to need to display a modal here, right? Because what's happened is that the user has selected a race that we've provided, because remember, if they select a custom race, they have to provide custom values for both. But in the event that they select a race that's actually within the enum and they want to provide a custom clan, then we need to provide a modal that only takes in their custom clan. Okay, so let's define that right up here above the clan select. And we'll say class custom clan modal. And this is a frog modal. And for our init, we're going to take in the current clan, which could be an optional union of clan or string. And then for the superclass call, let's put in a title of custom clan value. No, let's say set custom clan value. There we go. And let's make our instructions field. So self.addItem input text. The style is input text style.multiline. Label is instructions. And our placeholder, let's say enter your custom clan value in the box below. And then what do we want for our more verbose instructions? How about enter your custom clan value below. This isn't required, and if you don't want to enter one, simply submit a blank dialog. Okay? Maybe that's too overcomplicated, but that's what I decided on, and we're going with it. Okay, and we'll make this required equal to false. So they can, if they want, delete their custom value. Now, they could potentially select the NA option from the clan enum, but we'll give them this option as well because the behavior matches the behavior of our other modals, so it would make sense that they could do it here as well. Okay, so let's say below that, self.addItem, and input text as always. And our style is going to be input text style.singleline. The label is going to be clan. Placeholder, well, that'll be boring. It'll be the same as last time. So, for example, pad leaper. And we want to set our current value, oh, not custom ID, excuse me, the value equal to current value, current clan, if current clan, if not, is instance, current clan, clan enum, else none. Okay, let's set our max length equal to 25, like we did before, and then we're going to make this not required, okay, because we want to make sure that they can nullify the value if possible, if desired, excuse me. So let's say async def callback here. Self.value is going to equal self.children sub1.value if self.children sub1.value else none. So in the event that they've submitted a blank box here indicating that they want to delete the value, we're going to store a none value. Okay, we're going to mark the modal as complete, so set that to true. Await interaction.response.edit message for a dummy reply, and then self.stop to close the modal. Okay, cool. Let's jump back down to clan select. We're on a roll now. So let's say modal equals custom clan modal, and we're going to pass in the at aag._clan because we have that reference right here. And then we can come down and say await interaction.response.send modal and drop the modal in there, and then await modal.wait for a reply. If modal.complete, so if the user has indeed completed the modal and submitted that information to us in some way, whether it's a string value or a none value because they deleted their value, their data, let's say that the response equals modal.value. And so now it's going to be equal to a string value. Okay, so let's come down here outside of the if block, and we're going to say so we already have the reference, aag.clan, the property, equals response. Okay, so it's either going to equal this clan enum that we instantiated here, or it's going to equal the string value we grabbed from the modal. Okay, let's say self.view.complete equals true. And then we may or may not have already responded to this, right? We always need to have one proper response to any interaction. But the only time that we've responded here is if this clan, if the value is clan.custom. So they selected a custom value, and then in which case we can send our modal. But that may leave it unresponded to. So I just want to try a dummy response. Interaction.response.edit message. And in the event that we accept, we can just pass. Okay? And then finally, let's say await self.view.stop and toss in a type ignore to prevent the squiggly. Okay, cool. So that's the callback for our clan selector. Let's make sure we go up to the top and we export our race clan select view here in Dunder All, and then we can go back over to our profile at a glance to see that the red squiggly has disappeared. Okay, that's cool. So set race clan is now working. Let's jump back over to our at a glance UI and check the race clan button. It looks like our callback is completed here. Let's make sure that we add a copy of the race clan button to our at a glance view. And I'd like to actually add this here above the gender pronoun button. Okay, race clan button, and we're going to input self.aag. What did we want? We wanted the race. That's right. That's right. Race. Okay. Excellent. So let's go ahead and run our command and see if it works. Okay, and we can go ahead and pull up Discord as long as it loads. Okay, looking good. All right, let's run at a glance. Okay, we're in business. Let's click our button and make sure that the appropriate behavior is happening. Okay, so our prompt is here. Looks like our race selector is looking good, so I'll select this one. But it appears we have an error. Okay, so let's jump into our code and see what the problem is. So it looks like it has something to do with the clan select options. As we can see right here, object of type none has no length. Okay, so we are trying to get the length of the label for the select menu object, or the select option. Okay, so let's see here. So we're calling clan.propername for the label. So the issue is happening within proper name. Okay, and I see the issue here. So we've made the mistake of forgetting our else, our final else condition. So we can just drop down here and say return self.name. Okay, because that's going to be the catch for anything that isn't these values. We just forgot to add that in. Okay, let's go ahead and rerun. All right, so let's run our command again. Okay, and it looks like the value was saved, even though we were unable to update the previous select menu. That's okay. So let's check race clan again. Okay, and for race, this time I'm going to be a Miqo'te. Okay, it looks like we're not properly responding to our interaction, so the interaction failed. So let's jump back over and take care of that now. So this is going to be in our UI at a glance. And then this is happening when we click on when we interact with the race select. So let's jump down here to our race select. As you can see, this module is getting a little bit big, so I apologize. Perfect. Okay, so it looks like, yep, we're not responding properly. So I just want to add an else condition here. I want to say await interaction.response.edit message. Okay, we're just going to add this dummy reply right here. And let's rerun. And we can jump back into Discord and test. Okay, so let's try again. Let's change our race. Okay, and there's the behavior we're looking for. So it's been responded to, the box is non-selectable, and the placeholder's been changed. Okay, let's change our clan now. Okay, so I'll be a Seawolf. Okay, very good. So it looks like everything worked properly, but our message didn't delete itself. Okay, that's not hard to fix. Let's jump back over into our at-a-glance UI. And here in the race clan select view, we forgot to say right here after our args that we pass into the superclass, close on complete equals true. Okay, just like that. And now we're going to be able to close the message after we finish with it. Okay, so let's try that. Make sure we restart our bot. Okay, looking good. Let's go ahead and pull up Discord. Say at a glance. Okay, let's change our race to, I'll be an Aura for now. Okay, that's good. I'll be a Zayla. Okay, and there we go. The message deleted itself. And as you can see, our status message updated properly. Okay, we are in business. Next up, we can test the custom behavior. Okay, so let's say we want to make a custom race. All right, we're getting our modal here. Uh-oh. Oh no. Okay. Let's submit our custom values. Okay, excellent, excellent. This is looking really good. Okay, and let's try one custom value, which is just the clan. Okay, and remember, since I had a custom clan already entered, it has filled that value for me. Excellent. Okay, so let's submit that. And it says we have custom values, even though one of these is the race that we have provided in the bot. Okay, cool. This is looking good. So what do we want to do next? Well, let's just go to the next item in the list. How about we look at orientation? Cool. So let's jump back in our code. We could shut the bot off for now. And let's go up here to the top. Where do we want to say this? Let's say right below our race clan button and above the at a glance view, let's say class orientation button. Okay, this is a profile section button. And within our init, we're going to take the orientation, which is an optional union of orientation and string. Okay, this should be pretty familiar by now. Let's call the superclass. Label can be orientation, because this is the button label that we want to use. Orientation, excuse me. Disabled is false, as usual. And then we want to say row 0 for this. We'll make 2 rows of buttons, and this can be the last one in the top row. Orientation. Oh no. Okay, and then as always, we want to call self.setStyle. Self.setStyle with the orientation that we've passed in. And for our callback, let's do the usual behavior. AAG equals self.view.aag. And then we're going to say await aag.setOrientation and pass in the interaction that we've generated by clicking the button. And then we know the rest of this behavior. It's the behavior that had been in all of our buttons so far. So let's just finish defining this. Self.setStyle. And we're going to say AAG underscore orientation. And we'll just do our await edit message helper. Interaction equals interaction. Embed equals aag.status. And view, that's right, equals self.view. Okay, now let's define our set orientation function. Actually, let's go ahead and add this button to our button list here before we forget. And we're going to say self.aag.orientation. Okay. So now let's define our set orientation function in the at a glance class. We can just do that right here above update and below set race clan. Async def set orientation. Interaction. And no return. All right, let's define our prompt equals make embed. And we can set the title to select your orientation. No ellipsis there. And for the description, indent that. And for the description, we'll say open parentheses and select your preferred orientation from the selector below, period, 2 new lines, and then let's make this bold. If you select custom in tick marks, so it's a code snippet, a pop-up will appear for new line. You to provide your custom orientation value. Close the bold and end parentheses. Okay, we don't want a timestamp, do we? Nah. And then just like we've been doing, we can go ahead and just copy this behavior because it's the same behavior. We're just going to rename this orientation select view. Okay? But we're getting a squiggly because we haven't defined that yet. So let's jump back into our at a glance UI, and we can define this down here, right below everything else. Let's say class orientation select view. Okay, this is going to be a frog view. Big surprise there, right? So when we define our init, we are going to take in at the owner as usual, which is a union member user. And then we're also going to take in the profile object, which in this case is a profile at a glance. Okay, let's make sure we call the superclass with our owner, any args, close on complete is true, and then also keyword args. Oh, we haven't passed any args or keyword args because we don't need those here. I apologize. Okay, so just these two values. Okay, we're going to say self.aag, which is a profile at a glance, equals the profile object we've passed in. And then let's go ahead and say self.addItem, orientation, select. Okay, just like that. But we haven't defined our orientation select. So let's do that right above the orientation select view. Okay, so class orientation select. This will be of type select. Okay, so for our init, we don't need to take any parameters, which is always exciting. And let's call the superclass init. For the placeholder, I want to say select your orientation. And for our options, I bet you know what we're going to use here, orientation.selectOptions. But we haven't defined those yet, so before we forget, let's just jump over and define that behavior down here in our orientation. Okay, so at static method, def select options, and we're going to return a list of select options, and the label will be orientation.properName. Value, as always, is string orientation.value, and then outside the constructor for orientation in orientation. Okay, doing good. So let's jump back into our UI, at a glance UI, and within the orientation select, let's finish off this super call. So we don't want this disabled, is false, and then the row will be 0 because this is the only select we're going to be attaching to our message. So for the callback, let's make a shortened version of a shortened reference to our at-a-glance object, so self.view.aag, and then the response is equal to orientation of the integer value of self.values sub 0. Okay, so we're grabbing whatever value they picked from the orientation select and we're dropping it into the orientation enum to see what they made, or to see what they selected, excuse me. So if response is orientation.custom, we're going to instantiate a modal, and for now we're just going to say custom orientation modal. And for this we're going to say aag._orientation, because remember we always want to pass in that value into the custom modal. Await interaction.response.send modal, and we drop the modal in there, and await modal.wait as well. Okay, following so far? All right, we should be pretty familiar with this behavior by this point, so that's not why I'm breaking off and defining these things before continuing. I think we've done this enough times that we can just write the behavior and then jump back and define the object. Okay, so hopefully that works. So under our modal.wait, we'll say if not modal.complete. Well, we don't want to do anything. We just want to return. Okay, we want to be done with this. And otherwise, our response equals modal.value. Okay, so if it's not complete, forget this, we're out of here. Otherwise, we grab that value. Okay, now down here outside the if block, so this is going to happen regardless, no matter what we do or what the user picks, aag.orientation, the property, equals response. Okay, and then we're going to mark the view as complete. View.complete equals true. And then remember, we may not have responded to this interaction. Okay, so we also need to say else await interaction.response.edit message, so we have a dummy reply. Okay, Finally, down here, after we complete the view, we can say await self.view.stop. And I'll drop in a type ignore here so we don't get a squiggly. Okay, cool. So this is our callback. Let's define our custom orientation modal right here above the orientation select, okay? So class custom orientation modal. This is a frog modal. And into the init, we need to get the current value. Oh goodness. And this is, of course, an optional union of orientation and string. And then we need to make the super call first. Super dot init. And for the title, we can put parentheses there. For the title, let's say custom orientation set your custom orientation value. There we go. I like that better. Okay, now let's add our instructions field. So self.addItem, input text. The style is input text style.multiline. The label is instructions. Our placeholder is going to be enter your custom sexual orientation. And the value is going to be a little more verbose, but there's not really much more we can need to say about that. So enter the text you want to display as your sexual orientation. Okay. Lastly, we never require the instructions field, so let's mark that as false. Then down here, next, we can say self.addItem, input text. And for this one, the style is going to be input text style.singleline. The label is going to be, we'll just say sexual orientation. Let's make the placeholder, example, frog. Then we don't want this to be required, okay, because the user could potentially erase their value using this, so we don't want, we want to be able to set a null value. And we will set our max length to 40, okay, because that's going to avoid any weird formatting, and that should give them enough space to put in a custom value. Okay, let's define our callback. We'll just say self.value equals self.children sub1.value if self.children sub1.value else none. Okay, in case they delete it. Complete equals true. Self.complete is true. Await interaction.response.edit message. And then we just need to say self.stop to close the modal. Okay, very cool. So there's our callback for the modal. Let's step backwards and make sure that everything is set up, and then we can test. Okay, so our orientation select, no squigglies, very good. Okay, orientation select view is looking good. Did we add the orientation button to our at a glance view way up here? Yes, we did. Okay, so let's go back over here. Oh, yep, we need to go into our at a glance UI and export the orientation select view in Dunder All, so let's do that. And then over here in our at a glance class, the orientation select view is no longer squigglied. Okay, so I think everything should be set to test. Let's see how it goes. All right, so are we starting up successfully? Yes, indeed we are. Okay, let's go ahead and test. All right, orientation button is there. That's good. Looking good here. Let's pick one. Okay, and the behavior is working correctly. So let's do a custom value just to make sure that's working. Okay, excellent. and it's saying custom value right here. Cool. All right, so it looks like orientation is working. And with that, we have 3 out of our 6 at a glance sections functional and ready to go. Cool. So I'm going to stop the video here because the next 3 will probably take just as much time, and I don't think a 3-hour video is going to be of interest to anyone, and I need some sleep. So I appreciate everybody watching, and I hope you have a great night.